The first time someone sees the Marfa Lights, the reaction is almost never neutral. There is always a pause, a silence that stretches a little too long, followed by a question whispered more than spoken. What am I really looking at? In the vast emptiness of West Texas, where the land seems to go on forever, and the night sky presses down with an almost physical weight, small glowing orbs appear without warning. They shimmer, drift, split apart, merge again, and sometimes vanish as suddenly as they came. For over a century, these lights have unsettled travelers, puzzled scientists, and fueled stories that refuse to die. And perhaps the most unsettling part is not that the lights exist, but that even now, with satellites orbiting Earth and telescopes peering into distant galaxies, no one can say with absolute certainty what causes them. Imagine standing alone on a deserted stretch of highway, the air still and dry, the silence broken only by the wind brushing against scrubgrass. There are no city lights nearby, no buildings, no familiar landmarks to anchor your sense of scale. The darkness feels complete, almost intentional, as if the desert itself is holding its breath. Then, far off on the horizon, a soft glow appears. At first it seems distant, harmless, maybe a car, but it doesn't move like headlights. It floats, it pulses, it rises slightly, then drops, then splits into two separate lights that drift apart like curious creatures testing their surroundings. In that moment, logic begins to struggle against instinct, and a thought creeps in that many witnesses later admit they tried to suppress. This is not normal. Stories of the Marfa Lights go back to the late 19th century, long before highways, long before modern vehicles, and long before electric infrastructure reached this remote region. Cowboys riding at night reported strange flames hovering above the ground. Ranchers spoke of ghostly lanterns that seemed to follow them, retreating when approached, reappearing when backs were turned. Native oral traditions in the area spoke of mysterious lights long before settlers arrived, often describing them as spirits, omens, or guardians of the land. These accounts are important not because they prove a supernatural explanation, but because they establish something crucial. Whatever the Marfa Lights are, people were seeing them long before modern technology could easily explain them away. As the 20th century unfolded, the phenomenon did not fade. Instead, it attracted more attention. In the 1950s and 1960s, as automobiles became common and roads stretched deeper into the desert, sightings increased. Tourists began to arrive, hoping to catch a glimpse for themselves. Some left disappointed, others left shaken, and a few left convinced they had witnessed something that fundamentally challenged their understanding of reality. What makes the Marfa Lights particularly compelling is their consistency. These are not random one-off sightings. They appear again and again, often under similar conditions, behaving in ways that seem to follow patterns, yet resist full predictability. Scientists, of course, have not ignored the phenomenon. Over the decades, numerous investigations have been conducted, ranging from informal observations to structured studies using cameras, spectrographs, and environmental sensors. One of the most commonly cited explanations is atmospheric refraction, particularly the bending of light caused by temperature differences in the air. In desert environments, temperature inversions are common, especially at night. Warm air near the ground and cooler air above it can create conditions where distant light sources appear displaced, floating above the horizon or moving in unusual ways. According to this theory, headlights from cars many miles away could appear as hovering orbs, distorted by the atmosphere into something far stranger than their true source. At first glance, this explanation seems reasonable, even elegant. The desert, after all, is known for optical illusions. Mirages are well documented, and human perception is notoriously unreliable, especially in low-light conditions. But here is where the mystery deepens. There are documented sightings of the Marfa Lights from periods before automobiles were present in the region. Additionally, many witnesses report movements that do not align with known roadways. The lights sometimes move vertically, sometimes hover in place for extended periods, and sometimes accelerate or decelerate in ways that do not correspond to vehicles traveling on distant highways. If these are headlights, they are behaving like no headlights anyone has ever encountered. Another proposed explanation involves natural gas emissions. In some regions of the world, lights known as will-o'-the-wisps have been attributed to the ignition of gases such as methane or phosphine rising from the ground. These gases can glow or briefly ignite under certain conditions, creating floating lights that appear ghostly and unpredictable. However, geological surveys of the Marfa area have not found sufficient concentrations of such gases to account for the frequency and duration of the sightings. Moreover, gas-based lights typically burn out quickly and do not exhibit the complex movements described by many observers. Then there is the psychological angle. Human brains are pattern-seeking machines, especially in ambiguous environments. When faced with darkness, isolation, and expectation, the mind can amplify small stimuli into dramatic experiences. Some skeptics argue that the Marfa Lights are a combination of distant light sources, environmental conditions, and human imagination. According to this view, once a person expects to see something strange, they are more likely to interpret ordinary phenomena in extraordinary ways. Yet this explanation also has its limits. The Marfa Lights have been captured on video and photographed by multiple independent observers. sometimes simultaneously from different vantage points. These are not hallucinations occurring in isolated minds. They are shared experiences. What truly sets the Marfa Lights apart is not just that they exist, but that they seem to defy categorization. Each explanation accounts for some aspects of the phenomenon but fails to explain others. Atmospheric refraction might explain horizontal movement but not vertical hovering. Vehicle headlights might explain brightness but not pre-automobile sightings. Psychological expectation might influence perception but cannot account for recorded physical light sources. The result is a puzzle with too many pieces that do not quite fit together. Over time, the mystery has taken on a life of its own. The Marfa Lights have become a symbol of the unknown, a reminder that even in a world mapped by satellites and algorithms, there are still corners where certainty dissolves. Visitors arrive not just to see the lights, but to feel something, to stand at the edge of what is known and sense the vastness beyond it. Some describe a feeling of being watched, others a sense of calm, and others a deep unease they cannot fully articulate. The desert has a way of stripping away distractions, leaving only the observer and the experience, raw and unfiltered. There are moments, witnesses say, when the lights seem almost playful. They dart back and forth, responding to movement or sound, as if aware of being observed. While scientists caution against attributing intention to natural phenomena, these reports persist, passed from one observer to the next. And it is here, in this gray area between objective measurement and subjective experience, that the Marfa Lights exert their strongest pull. They invite interpretation without offering resolution. As night deepens and the stars wheel overhead, the lights sometimes fade, leaving behind only darkness and questions. People return to their cars, their hotels, their everyday lives, carrying with them a story that is difficult to share without sounding unbelievable. Yet many return again, drawn by the hope of seeing the lights once more, of capturing that moment when the ordinary world briefly opens onto something stranger. The Marfa Lights do not simply appear. They linger in memory, challenging the assumption that everything must have a neat explanation. And perhaps that is why this phenomenon continues to fascinate. In an age obsessed with answers, the Marfa Lights remain stubbornly ambiguous. They resist final definition, slipping through the cracks of science, folklore, and skepticism alike. Whether they are the product of rare atmospheric conditions, misunderstood technology, or something not yet understood, they serve as a quiet reminder that mystery has not been eradicated. It has merely retreated to places like the Texas desert, waiting patiently for those willing to look into the darkness and admit that they do not know everything. As we continue this journey, we will move deeper into the theories, the eyewitness accounts, and the unsettling implications of what the Marfa Lights might represent. Because the real question is not only what these lights are, but why, after more than 100 years, they still refuse to be fully explained, and what that refusal says about the limits of human understanding. As curiosity about the Marfa Lights grew, so did the number of people willing to chase them into the desert night. What began as local stories slowly transformed into a phenomenon that drew journalists, researchers, skeptics, and believers from across the country. Each group arrived with different expectations, and each left with different conclusions. Some were convinced they had found a rational explanation, others left more confused than when they arrived, and a few walked away quietly, changed in ways they struggled to describe. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Marfa Lights is how personal the experience can be. Two people standing side by side may witness the same glowing orb, yet interpret it in completely different ways. One sees physics at work, an atmospheric illusion bending light across miles of desert air. The other feels a deep, almost primal fear, as if something ancient has briefly revealed itself. This split reaction is not incidental. It is central to the phenomenon itself. The Marfa Lights sit at the intersection of science and emotion, fact and feeling, explanation and mystery. During the mid-20th century, several organized studies attempted to bring clarity to the issue. Teams set up observation posts, documenting the lights' positions, movements, colors, and durations. They used triangulation to estimate distance and altitude, infrared cameras to detect heat signatures, and environmental sensors to track temperature, wind, and humidity. Some nights yielded nothing at all. Other nights produced hours of activity. Lights appeared red, white, blue, and occasionally yellow, sometimes bright enough to cast faint reflections, sometimes dim and flickering like dying embers. In a few cases, researchers believed they had successfully correlated the lights with distant vehicle traffic. When cars moved along far-off highways, lights appeared on the horizon in roughly corresponding positions. This seemed to support the headlight refraction theory. But then there were nights when the highways were empty, traffic had been halted or monitored, and the lights still appeared. Even more troubling were reports of lights appearing in locations where no roads existed at all, moving across open desert or rising from low valleys before drifting away. Eyewitness accounts add another layer of complexity. Many describe the lights as having depth, not flat like distant headlights but spherical, almost three-dimensional. Some say the lights appear to approach, growing larger before abruptly stopping or fading out. Others report lights that seem to react to their presence, dimming when stared at directly or flaring brighter when attention is diverted. While these perceptions could be influenced by human psychology, the consistency of certain descriptions across decades is difficult to ignore. There are also reports of physical sensations accompanying sightings, a sudden drop in temperature, an unnatural silence, or a feeling of pressure in the ears. A few witnesses describe nausea and disorientation, or an overwhelming sense of dread. These accounts are controversial and often dismissed, yet they mirror reports associated with other unexplained phenomena around the world. Whether these sensations are environmental, psychological, or something else entirely remains unresolved. As the mystery deepened, more unconventional theories emerged. Some speculated that the Marfa Lights could be linked to electromagnetic phenomena. The desert is rich in certain minerals, and shifting tectonic stresses could, in theory, generate electrical discharges known as earthquake lights. These rare luminous events have been documented before seismic activity in various parts of the world. However, the Marfa region is not particularly seismically active, and the frequency of the lights far exceeds what would be expected from such a mechanism. Others proposed that the lights might be plasma-based phenomena, similar to ball lightning. Ball lightning is itself poorly understood, described as glowing spheres that appear during storms and move unpredictably before vanishing. Yet Marfa lights are often observed on clear nights, with no storms in sight, making this explanation incomplete at best. Inevitably, speculation drifted toward the extraterrestrial. The idea that the Marfa Lights might be some form of unidentified aerial phenomenon captured the imagination of many. Reports of lights that move intelligently, accelerate suddenly, or divide and recombine feed directly into narratives of advanced technology beyond human origin. While there is no concrete evidence linking the Marfa Lights to extraterrestrial activity, the lack of a definitive explanation leaves space for such ideas to flourish. In the absence of certainty, imagination fills the gaps. But there is another possibility that is often overlooked: the idea that the Marfa Lights represent a natural phenomenon not yet fully understood. Science is not static. Throughout history, phenomena once labeled supernatural or impossible were later explained as knowledge advanced. Lightning, earthquakes, and even diseases were once attributed to gods or spirits. The Marfa Lights may fall into this category, a reminder that unexplained does not mean unexplainable, only that the explanation has not yet been found. Still, the emotional impact of the lights cannot be reduced to data alone. There is something about seeing them in person that defies description. The isolation of the desert amplifies every sensation. The vastness of the sky makes the lights feel small yet significant, fragile yet deliberate. Time seems to stretch, conversations fall quiet. People stop checking their phones, stop recording, and simply watch. In those moments, the need for explanation fades, replaced by a more profound experience. Or local residents often have a more pragmatic relationship with the lights. For some, they are simply part of the landscape, as familiar as the mountains or the stars. Others avoid discussing them altogether, wary of attracting attention or ridicule. A few embrace the mystery, sharing stories passed down through generations. These stories vary, but they share a common thread. The lights are not to be chased, mocked, or underestimated. They are something to be respected. As tourism grew, an official viewing area was established, offering visitors a safe place to observe the phenomenon. On clear nights, people gather there, bundled against the desert cold, scanning the horizon in silence. Sometimes nothing happens. Sometimes a single light appears briefly, prompting gasps and hurried whispers. And sometimes, the desert comes alive with movement, multiple lights dancing across the darkness, defying easy explanation. What is striking is how the Marfa Lights affect belief. Skeptics often arrive confident they will leave with a rational answer. Believers arrive hoping for confirmation. Yet, many leave occupying a strange middle ground, no longer certain of what they believe. The lights do not convert or convince in a straightforward way. Instead, they unsettle, forcing observers to confront uncertainty itself. In this way, the Marfa Lights are less about the lights and more about the human response to the unknown. They expose the limits of perception, the fragility of assumptions, and the discomfort we feel when faced with something that does not fit neatly into existing frameworks. They remind us that not knowing is not a failure, but a fundamental part of exploration. As we move forward, the question becomes more pressing. If the Marfa Lights are not fully explained by current science, what does that imply? Are we witnessing a rare convergence of natural conditions, or glimpsing a phenomenon that challenges existing models? And why do these lights appear here, in this particular stretch of desert, as if bound to the land itself? The deeper we look, the more the mystery expands. And as we will see next, the Marfa Lights are not an isolated case. Similar phenomena have been reported across the world, raising the possibility that what happens in the Texas desert may be part of something far larger, something that stretches beyond geography and into the unknown itself. When the Marfa Lights are placed in a global context, the mystery begins to feel even more unsettling. Similar luminous phenomena have been reported in remote regions across the world, often under conditions strikingly similar to those in West Texas. In Australia, the Min lights drift across the outback, described by witnesses as glowing orbs that follow travelers at night. In Norway, the Hesteland lights appear in a remote valley, observed for decades by scientists using sophisticated instruments. In Japan, Ghostly lights have long been associated with mountains and forests, woven deeply into folklore. These parallels raise a disturbing possibility. The Marfa Lights are not an isolated anomaly, but one expression of a broader, poorly understood phenomenon that manifests in specific environments across the planet. What unites many of these locations is isolation, geology, and atmosphere. Remote areas with minimal light pollution, significant mineral content, and unique atmospheric conditions seem to serve as stages where these lights appear. This pattern suggests that geography itself may play a critical role. The land, quite literally, may be part of the phenomenon. In the case of Marfa, the surrounding Chinati Mountains, the vast desert basin, and the dramatic temperature shifts between day and night create a complex natural laboratory. Yet even with this context, the behavior of the lights often exceeds what environmental models predict. Scientists studying similar lights elsewhere have documented behaviors that are deeply puzzling. Some lights appear to maintain a consistent altitude while traveling long distances. Others split into multiple orbs, then some change color abruptly, shifting from white to red to blue within seconds. These behaviors challenge simple explanations involving reflection or refraction. Light, under normal circumstances, does not behave this way without a dynamic and complex source. In Marfa, long-term observers have noticed patterns that are difficult to quantify but hard to dismiss. Certain times of year seem more active than others. Some claim the lights appear more frequently during periods of extreme temperature contrast, while others associate them with specific wind conditions. Yet no single variable consistently predicts their appearance. The lights seem to operate according to rules that are only partially visible, like fragments of a language no one fully understands. This unpredictability has led some researchers to propose that multiple phenomena may be involved. Perhaps what people call the Marfa Lights is not one thing but several different phenomena that appear similar to the human eye. Some sightings might indeed be refracted headlights. Others could involve rare electrical discharges or plasma effects. Still others may represent something entirely different. This layered explanation is intellectually satisfying but emotionally unsatisfying. It fragments the mystery rather than resolving it. There is also the question of why the lights inspire such strong emotional reactions. Fear, awe, curiosity, and even reverence are common responses. Psychologists suggest that encounters with unexplained phenomena activate deep cognitive processes tied to survival and meaning-making. When something violates expectations of how the world works, the brain enters a heightened state of alertness. This may explain why witnesses often remember their first sighting with vivid clarity, even decades later. Yet there are moments described by witnesses that go beyond heightened alertness. Moments when time seems to slow, when sound fades, when the lights appear to exist in a kind of suspended reality, detached from the normal flow of cause and effect. These experiences are deeply personal and impossible to verify, but they are reported with remarkable consistency. Whether these sensations are the result of neurological responses to unfamiliar stimuli or something more remains an open question. The Marfa Lights also challenge our relationship with certainty. Modern culture often assumes that with enough data, every mystery can be solved. Satellites track weather systems in real time. Algorithms predict behavior. Science has explained phenomena once thought impossible, and yet here is something that persists, stubbornly resisting closure. This resistance can be uncomfortable. It forces a confrontation with the limits of knowledge, not as a temporary failure, but as a fundamental condition. For some, this discomfort becomes an invitation rather than a threat. The Marfa Lights attract people who are drawn to the edges of understanding. Artists, philosophers, writers, and seekers arrive not to solve the mystery, but to experience it, to stand in the darkness and accept uncertainty as part of the human condition. In this sense, the lights function less as an object of study and more as a mirror, reflecting back our need for explanation, control, and meaning. Local legends have adapted over time, blending old stories with new interpretations. Where once the lights were seen as spirits or omens, they are now sometimes described as energy, consciousness, or signals. These narratives change with the culture, but the core experience remains the same. Something appears in the night that does not behave as expected, and people are left to interpret it through the lens of their beliefs. It is worth noting that despite decades of observation, no one has been able to physically approach the lights. Attempts to drive toward them often result in the lights receding or disappearing altogether. Whether this is due to changes in perspective, atmospheric conditions, or something else entirely is unclear, but the effect is powerful. The lights remain distant, untouchable, always just out of reach. This distance reinforces their mystique, preserving the boundary between observer and phenomenon. Technological advances have improved documentation but not resolution. High-resolution cameras capture more detail, yet the lights remain ambiguous. Sensors collect data, yet patterns remain elusive. Each new tool adds information, but also reveals new questions. This is the paradox of the Marfa Lights. The more closely they are examined, the more complex they appear. Some researchers caution against forcing an explanation too quickly. History is full of examples where premature conclusions delayed true understanding. Instead, they advocate for patience, long-term observation, and interdisciplinary study. Physics alone may not be enough. Atmospheric science, geology, psychology, and even anthropology may all play roles in unraveling the mystery. The Marfa Lights may be a phenomenon that exists at the intersection of multiple systems, none of which can fully explain it on their own. As night after night passes in the desert, the lights continue their silent performance. They appear without announcement and depart without explanation. They leave behind no physical trace, no clear evidence, only stories and questions, and perhaps that is their greatest power. They remind us that the world is not fully mapped, not fully understood, and not fully predictable. In a society increasingly dominated by screens and simulations, the Marfa Lights offer something rare, an encounter with the unknown that cannot be paused, replayed, or fully captured. You have to be there, you have to wait, and you have to accept that you may leave without answers. As we approach the final part of this journey, the focus shifts from what the Marfa Lights might be to what they mean. Not just scientifically, but culturally, psychologically, and philosophically, because whether they are a rare natural phenomenon or something entirely different, their true impact lies in how they challenge us to rethink our assumptions about reality itself. As the night deepens in the Texas desert, the Marfa Lights continue to appear and disappear on their own terms, indifferent to theories, cameras, and expectations. They do not announce themselves. They do not repeat on command. They offer no clear pattern that can be exploited or mastered. And in that refusal they reveal something profound about the nature of mystery itself. The Marfa Lights are not simply something to be explained. They are something to be encountered. For many who witness them, the experience lingers long after the desert fades in the rearview mirror. Days later, the mind returns to that moment when logic hesitated and certainty cracked. People replay what they saw, trying to fit it into familiar categories, but something resists. The lights do not behave like ordinary objects. They do not move like vehicles, burn like fire, or shimmer like reflections. They exist in a space between definitions, where explanation feels incomplete and dismissal feels dishonest. This lingering uncertainty is uncomfortable, especially in a culture that values answers over questions. Yet it is precisely this discomfort that gives the Marfa Lights their power. They force a confrontation with the limits of perception. Human vision is not a perfect instrument. The brain fills gaps, interprets signals, and constructs reality based on expectation and experience. The lights expose how fragile that construction can be when faced with something truly unfamiliar. And still, the lights are real in the most undeniable sense. They are seen, they are recorded, they are witnessed by thousands across generations. They do not belong solely to folklore or imagination. They exist in the physical world, even if their nature remains elusive. This tension between reality and uncertainty is what keeps the phenomenon alive, generation after generation. There is a temptation to believe that someday, technology will finally solve the mystery, that a new sensor, a more advanced model, or a breakthrough theory will reduce the Marfa Lights to a footnote in a textbook. It is possible. Science has done this many times before, but there is also a quieter possibility, one that is rarely discussed, that some phenomena are not meant to be neatly resolved, not because they are supernatural, but because they emerge from interactions too complex, too rare, or too subtle to be easily isolated. The Marfa Lights may be one such phenomenon, born from a precise alignment of land, air, temperature, light, and perception, a natural event that occurs only when countless variables align just right. If so, then their rarity is not a flaw in explanation, but a feature of reality itself. The world is not built solely from repeating patterns. It is also shaped by exceptions. For others, the lights take on a more symbolic meaning. They become a reminder that not everything important can be measured, that wonder still has a place in a world increasingly defined by data. Standing in the desert, watching the lights drift across the darkness, many feel something they did not expect. Humility, a sense of smallness, not in a negative way, but in a grounding one. The realization that the universe is vast, layered, and not obligated to explain itself. This may explain why attempts to commercialize or sensationalize the Marfa Lights often fall flat. The phenomenon resists spectacle. It does not perform on cue. It does not escalate into something dramatic or catastrophic. It simply exists, quietly, patiently, offering itself only to those willing to wait and accept uncertainty. In a way, the lights demand a slower kind of attention, one that modern life rarely encourages. Local residents often say that the desert teaches patience, that nothing happens quickly out there, and that expectation is the enemy of experience. Those who arrive demanding answers often leave frustrated. Those who arrive open, curious, and unhurried are more likely to see something, even if they cannot name it. This dynamic mirrors the mystery itself. The Marfa Lights do not reward certainty, they reward presence. There is also something deeply human about the way the lights inspire storytelling. Each witness becomes part of a chain, adding their experience to a collective narrative that stretches back more than a century. These stories evolve, shift, and adapt, but the core remains unchanged. Something strange appears in the night, and people are left changed by it. In this sense, the Marfa Lights are not just a phenomenon, but a shared cultural experience, a modern myth grounded in real observation. Skeptics are right to demand evidence. Believers are right to trust their experiences. And between these positions lies a space where curiosity thrives. The Marfa Lights occupy that space perfectly. They do not demand belief, nor do they surrender to disbelief. They simply continue to appear, reminding us that mystery is not a failure of knowledge, but a feature of exploration. As science continues to evolve, it may one day offer a comprehensive explanation that satisfies every question, or it may reveal that the lights are the result of multiple overlapping phenomena, each contributing a piece to a larger puzzle. Either outcome would expand understanding. But even then, something would remain: the memory of standing in the darkness, watching light move in ways that felt intentional, alive, and just beyond comprehension. And perhaps that is the true legacy of the Marfa Lights. Not that they prove anything extraordinary, but that they preserve a space where wonder survives. A place where certainty loosens its grip, and curiosity takes its place. In a world increasingly defined by immediacy and explanation, the Marfa Lights remind us that some experiences are richer when they remain unresolved. So if you ever find yourself in the Texas desert at night, far from city lights and distractions, take a moment to stop, let your eyes adjust, let the silence settle. Watch the horizon without expectation. You may see nothing, or you may see something that defies easy explanation. Either way, you will have touched the edge of something rare, an encounter with the unknown that asks nothing from you except attention. And if the lights appear, drifting softly across the darkness, remember this: you are not just witnessing a mystery, you are participating in it. A story that has been unfolding for generations, written not in words, but in light.